In fact, in Genesis chapter 50, his brothers, who had first conspired to take him away from his father, and then to kill him, to say he had been slain by a wild animal, then decided that no, we're not going to kill him, but we will sell him off into slavery, which they did. And it was many, many years later when a famine had happened and everyone had gone to Egypt, and the Hebrews moved into the area of the land of Goshen, and they were then able to live and to prosper in that area. And then finally their father Jacob died, and they were terribly afraid because they're thinking, our brother, our young brother, he is prime minister in Egypt. He has power equal to that of Pharaoh. He can put us to death if he wants to, or he can command us to a life of slavery. He can separate us from our families. He can do whatever he wants to with us. Joseph, of course, knew this, but that was not Joseph's heart. Joseph was a very honest and just and upright man for many years. And he came to his brothers and he said, you know, what you did to me, you meant this for evil, but the Lord meant it for the good. Notice Joseph didn't say, I'm going to use it for the good. He didn't sit there and take credit himself. And that's a danger we often face when we're speaking on behalf of God and acting on behalf of God, saying, I'm going to tell you this great truth. I'm going to do this great work in God's name. That's not our place to do that. Instead, what we can say is the Lord does not intend evil to come out of this thing that began as an evil thing. And that's a hard lesson to learn. That's a lesson we could all stand to learn. And if you slip and if you fall and if you do find yourself in a contentious situation and you find that you've been behaving poorly and you've been recompensing evil for evil, you can always stop, pray to the Lord, get your heart right, ask forgiveness, and reconcile with the person you have the difference with. That's the Lord's will. It's never too late to straighten things out. And that is what the Lord is saying here in these verses. Don't be prepared for vengeance. Now that does not preclude justice, but the Lord says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. By the same token, we're also taught throughout Scriptures that whatever the laws of the land are concerning a particular issue, that those laws are to be honored and carried out. We especially see that in the book of Romans. Romans chapter 13 points out our responsibility towards leadership, dignitary, and customary laws and so forth. So as we continue on now, we look at verse 43, and we see, Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despisefully use you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? But do not even the publicans do the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Now we look at verse 48 and we see, be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And we say, there's no way. There's no way that I can live an absolutely perfectly sinless life. There's no way that in all of the things that I do, that I can do them without creating some kind of error, without making some kind of mistake. Well, first of all, the word perfect there is translated from a Greek word teleos. And teleos means to be mature or complete. It does not necessarily mean to be without error. In fact, sinlessness means to be without error. It means to be hitting the mark every single time. When you're talking about true sinlessness, you're talking about, as a picture, someone who's an archer, and he's standing 50 yards away from a target, and the target is the size of a basketball, and he's hitting the bullseye every single time. That's the idea of sinlessness. We obviously can't do that either in our everyday lives. But perfection has much more to do with a matter of the heart. When we look at this love matter here, we do find in the Old Testament that we are to love our neighbor and to love our enemies. This is not simply a New Testament concept. But the reason Jesus is pointing this out is because of societal constraints, because of what we would call tradition. Here in the United States today, in the 21st century, we have enemies, foreign and domestic. We have enemies here in the United States that hate the nation, and we have enemies abroad. Now, it is our job to constrain them, it is our job to subdue them, and if need be, to bring them to justice. It is not our job to exact vengeance upon them, and it is not our job to hate them as persons, although we do need to hate the things that they represent and the things that they do. And that is the real challenge of being a Christian. The real challenge of being a Christian is really embodied in this group of 6 or 7 verses right here. Love the neighbor, but hate the sin. The small epistle of Jude, one of the half-brothers of Jesus. One of his statements is very much the same thing. It talks about us rescuing the one who has been trapped in the fire, that is, he's headed for hell. We rescue them by sharing with them the gospel of truth, but we detest that stench of the fire. We detest that thing that they do. We try, in fact, to pray for their salvation so that the sin may be separated from the sinner, or more exactly, the sinner may be separated from the sin. We'll continue to talk more and more about salvation as we go through all of the Gospels, but especially as we get into the Gospel according to John. So when we speak about verse 46, 47, and 48, the Lord again is reiterating, it's great if you love one another. In fact, there is a test in the Gospel of John that we can test to see if another person is a true believer by seeing if they love other believers. So we should first love other believers. That's a given. But beyond that, we need to love those that we don't know. We need to love the unlovable. We need to love the unkind. We need to love the angry and the cynical. You may not realize this, but in loving someone who seems to be unlovable, you may be used of the Lord to unveil something that's really under a very thin veneer. I've discovered that oftentimes a person who is very angry and very cynical on the surface, just beneath that surface is someone who is afraid of something, and it's fear usually comes from a lack of control. And when someone realizes or comes to the realization that they are not really in control of every aspect of their lives, it becomes a great comfort to them when they know that there is a God who is in control of everything. They can take their focus away from what the present circumstance is, what the present difficulty is. They can step away from that and they can say, yes, this is a challenge for now, but the Lord promises me eternity. The Lord promises me eternity of peace and of joy. Something way beyond happiness, something way beyond anything I can comprehend. We're even told in the New Testament that there are things that the Lord has prepared for us that are in dimensions of joy that we cannot even comprehend in this mortal frame. We have no way to understand that. So when this chapter closes with this portion of the Sermon on the Mount, and the Lord commands us to be perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect, this is very important. He's telling us, seek that purity in heart, because then you'll see God. When you see God, you will desire and you will know that you are learning and growing in His strength, and you can rest in His comfort.